All right, this is Chat UTD. It's clear there's no imminent sale of Man United, so we may as well talk about more pressing things. We've got a game against Liverpool this weekend. I will come back to the ownership at the end of the video, but there's something I want to start with that I was going to do a conversation about last week, but talk of the takeover took over. There's a mouthful. And that is Jim Ratcliffe's comments on Ruben Amorim. So he said, I would give him 3 years. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video talking about United needed to pick a lane regarding managers. And the different options I outlined were either you are quite strategic and know that you've got 3 stages that we have to go through to be ultimately properly successful again, and you'll need a stage 1 manager, a stage 2 manager, and a stage 3 manager. And United never do that. They're not strategic enough to do that. They don't look at it that way. There doesn't need to be drama. There doesn't need to be toxicity. It can just be we have a manager with a skill set for the stage that we're in. That's not happening at United. It never will happen at United under this ownership structure. The other option I spoke about was, let's call it the Fergie option, which is within reason, you pick a guy that you 100% believe in and have complete faith in him for a period of time and give him the time he needs within reason to be successful. And again, United never do that. What United tend to do is pick a manager who they believe will get us through all 3 stages from dog shit to champions. And when inevitably that doesn't work out, they dilly-dally for a while, then they sack that manager and the whole thing starts again. So you might think, well, it's music to your ears then that Jim Ratcliffe's saying that he would give Amorim 3 years. It would be, but it's not going to happen. And I think the comment's been taken out of context. It's not an unconditional 3 years where it's a free pass for Amorim to take his sweet time to improve. Jim Ratcliffe will want to see signs of improvement very, very quickly. He's 73 this weekend, Jim Ratcliffe. And if, as he professes to be, he's a Manchester United fan, he will surely want to see some chinks of light and some good football and some signs that the guy that he's picked and him and his team have picked is going to be successful. And if Amorim continues on the same trajectory that he's on now, 37 points from 34 games, and we hit a bit of a bad patch now until the next international break, I wouldn't even rule out him being sacked in the next international break, let alone having 3 years. Some people have said, that's it, Amorim's here for 3 years. And he's not, unless he improves dramatically. I think people forget, Ineos made some pretty big statements when they came in. So Ratcliffe in February of 2024 said in his first big interview, I want United to be competitive again in the next 2 or 3 years. Now, competitive again to me means finishing top 3 or 4, being right up there in the conversation at the top of the English league. At the end of this season, Ineos will have been in post for 2.5 years, and we are not close to being competitive. There's the other ridiculous comment that was made by Barada about Mission 28, that we were going to try and win the league by 2028, which is, it's hard to say it without laughing. And I'm sure they've revised that now, but they've made some pretty big statements. And as I said, he's not getting younger. And I don't think, although of course, Amorim is their guy, and I'm sure he will get a bit of patience because of that, it's not unconditional. It can't be unconditional, and it won't be. So the truth is, Amorim, it's the same position that we were in before the international break. Amorim needs to vastly improve. And we need to start seeing some signs that his message is getting across. And if we don't, he'll get sacked, just like anyone else would be. He might have a bit of grace, but he'll get sacked if he doesn't improve soon. Liverpool at the weekend, they're not playing well. They've not played well all season, but the results are catching up with them. You could argue we're probably in better form than they are. They're obviously a much better team. But last season, one of our best performances under Amorim was at Anfield, where we got a 2-2 draw, and I think we deserved to win the game. and we do tend to do all right against the so-called bigger teams. The obvious area of concern is the midfield. This week, it was revealed, I think it was in The Athletic, that Amorim apparently said to Ugarte at the end of last season, "You're not the player you used to be at Sporting Lisbon. We'll sell him then." This is something that happens at United. It's not just under Amorim. I've noticed it over the last few years. If a player is bought for big money and they don't settle in and it doesn't go the way that the manager wants it to go, they just sit there and rot. We've got a massive hole in our midfield which needs to be filled with someone who's a ratter, someone who gets around, an irritant, who's good at ball recoveries, and then gives it to someone better than him. And we spent 50 million quid on Ugarte to do that same thing, and he's sat on the bench. As a coach, you've got to help him to unlock whatever potential he has and find the form that got him the move in the first place. That's your job as the manager. But I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll pick Casemiro and Bruno, and with Casemiro, guarantee he gets booked in the first 20 minutes and then he's a walking red card. Fernandes will be all over the place, here, there and everywhere like a blue-ass fly. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So you could think, well, that's going to be a big problem. Weirdly, and it is weird, it doesn't seem to show up as a problem in the games that it should show up as a problem, the midfield, because that midfield is not good enough. And yet against better teams with better midfields, it seems to work better. So I gave the example of last year against Liverpool at Anfield. Last year away at Arsenal in the FA Cup, we were down to 10 men for an hour or so and were brilliant. Arsenal at home this season, you could say Chelsea at home this season, that's a bit different because they were down to 10 men and then we were. But City away apart, I think I look at the big games that we play against really good teams with really good midfields and it doesn't stand out. So it's just not consistent. It just doesn't. That midfield can be quite disciplined and can be quite decent, but it's just not often enough. I think there's a lesson to be learned from Liverpool's midfield in that they're not spectacular. They're functional. They've got a functional midfield. There's talk of us spending 100 million quid on Baleba or 60 million on Wharton, and I'm not saying those two signings would be wrong, or we'll probably get one of those signings. That either of those signings would be wrong, but I don't necessarily think we need to spend that amount of money on a midfielder. I think we need a midfielder who can get the ball, win it back, and pass it 15 yards accurately. Have we not got someone in the academy who can do that? Have we not got a scouting network looking all over the world for a player who can do that? I don't think it's rocket science. I think it can overcomplicate football sometimes. We need a functional midfield player, or maybe a couple of functional midfield players. We're not winning leagues anytime soon. We just need someone who do the basics in the middle of the park, and not so that we don't get overrun. And then give it to the better players who are there to do the more creative things. Maybe I'm being too simplistic, I don't know, but I think we've got a chance of getting a result against Liverpool. We tend to do better against this type of opposition, as in like a high-profile game. Sadly, I don't think ultimately it matters all that much, which is really sad to say. I mean, back in the day, I'd be nervous as a kid going into a weekend where we were playing Liverpool. And if we lost, it'd ruin my weekend. And if we won, it'd make my weekend. If we lose at the weekend, I'll think, it's par for the course. We're not a particularly good team. It doesn't really matter that much. Liverpool fans don't even take the piss out of us anymore. They just pity us. If we win, it would make my weekend. But a few days later, I'd come back down to earth with a bump, knowing that the Glazers are still our owners, and that puts a ceiling on what we can achieve. And there's your segue into the final part of the video and talking about the ownership. The general understanding seems to be that there is a consortium in the UAE who, depending on what you read, either already exist or is being formed as we speak to potentially put a bid in for Man United at some point. Nothing's imminent, nothing's close. If that consortium isn't even in place yet, you could be talking about 2027 before they put a bid in, because these things tend to take time. This is obviously a multi-billion-pound transaction. I did a video a couple of days ago and said in that, from the Glazers' perspective, now's the time to sell, because the drag-along rights, drag-along clause, whatever you want to call it, means that they can only sell the club for $33 a share or more, which is a premium price. So that would equate the club to being worth around £5 billion. The club is actually worth £2.5 billion. So they can legitimately, because of a clause, charge double the amount of what the club's worth. What I didn't consider was, why would someone buy it for that? When apparently in February 2027, the drag-along clause ends and you could legitimately go in and say, right, I'm going to offer you £2.5 billion for United. Well, the obvious answer as to why you wouldn't just do that is the Glazers won't accept that. It doesn't matter that the drag-along clause finishes. The Glazers in 2027 will still charge £5 to £6 billion for United, if not more, because they're greedy bastards. And that's not going to change whether there's a drag-along clause or not. So now would be a decent time for them to sell. But now's the only time as a buyer that you could do it, because when that drag-along clause ends, there's no chance they're going to sell. So the honest answer is, why, to the question, why would someone buy it now? If you want Man United, now is the window of opportunity. Now's the only time that I think they'll sell, because they could do it legitimately at a premium price. And, you know, the value of the club's irrelevant. The Glazers, unfortunately, hold the keys to the kingdom. And if they decide that those keys are going to cost you £5 billion, whether they're worth 2.5 or £3 billion or not, is irrelevant. They hold the keys to the castle. Do you want it or do you not? That's what you'll have to pay. What the share price says is irrelevant. So the question would be, of a consortium that wants to buy Man United, how much do you want to buy Man United? How important is it that you don't want to get your pants pulled down versus how important is it to buy Man United? Because if you want to buy them, you'll have to pay £5 to £6 billion to get them. That's just fact. Whenever you choose to do it. And the people we're talking about are rich beyond any of our comprehension, I'm sure. So do you want to own Man United? If you do, you're going to have to do it now. In 2027, the Glazers will have had 3 or 4 years of not taking dividends, of not really milking the cash cow, as people call it. There's an expression my dad uses, they'll have broken its back, as in they'll have suffered, as they would say it. Of course, there's no sympathy for them, but in their minds, they'll have suffered not milking the cow for a few years, and they'll see 2 years more of there'll be 2 years further down the line of light at the end of the tunnel for them, where they can start milking that cow again. And they're not going to have done all that and then go, oh yeah, you can have it for £3 billion. The stadium is a point of contention for me. It's a whole other video probably. I don't necessarily believe, I certainly don't think it'll be finished by 2030. But let's just take them at their word and say it is. In 2027, they're 3 years away from the new stadium, which really is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for them. So there is no chance they're selling the club at that time. You might have half a chance now if you put in a bid of a premium, at a premium. But unfortunately, I think, bar exceptional circumstances, particularly after that drag-along clause finishes, I think we're stuck with them, which is really, really sad. Excuse me. And I found myself earlier in the week, midweek, feeling really flat about this, because I'd allowed myself foolishly to imagine a world without the Glazers. And when I imagine that world without the Glazers, I don't necessarily think about a specific set of circumstances or visualise certain things happening that don't happen now or anything like that. I think if I thought long enough about it, I probably would. It's not that. It's more like it's a feeling. it's a feeling I get when I let myself think that they're not our owners, or that could be a possibility. It's freedom, it's liberation, it's utopia. And then you realise that when you watch videos like there's a fella who does a channel called The Muppeteers on YouTube, who's very, very pragmatic and he's well connected, I think. And then you hear Andy Mitt, and you hear these pragmatists, and you think, this ain't happening. Certainly not happening anytime soon. And it's a long way down from utopia back to the realisation that actually they are our owners and they're going to continue to be our owners. And they realise that the reason it's such a long way down is because the reality of life under the Glazers is horrific. And when you've let yourself think about a world without them, which I had, which is my fault, the reality of it stinks even more. Because the reality is, life under the Glazers is pretty predictable, pretty boring. Certainly, as of now, under this ownership structure, I've resigned myself to the fact I'm not watching my team play good football. I'm not watching them play exciting, vibrant, energetic football that's full of life and energy. That's not happening. It hasn't happened for a long time. I'm not watching a team in the top four. I've said it before, as a competitive, proper football club at the top end of English football, United have finished under the Glazers. Realistically, it's just a case of how finished are we? How bad does it get? Like, we're a team, I think, realistically, that season in, season out, and as of now, will finish between 7th and 17th. So the only thing that's unpredictable about that is just how pathetic and bad it gets. Because 7th should be the worst case scenario, and it's the best case scenario under the Glazers now. And that was the case in Erik ten Hag's last season. It was the case last season. It's the case this season. And as things stand, I can't see it being any different next season. And we're Man United, a club with the third biggest income in world football. And the reality of it is that our ceiling is probably 7th. And a manager will come in and he might do all right for a bit, he might not. Nothing really changes. The manager will leave, different sets of players come in, they don't achieve anything. All of it comes back to the culture, the environment that's been set by these cretins that are still the owners of United. So it's predictable, and it's sad, and it's broken. And despite all that, there's not a hint of protest. There's not a hint of anarchy. There's apathy and resignation all around Old Trafford. And I think I mentioned midweek, good people have come into this football club. People who've achieved things elsewhere and just sunk. Part of that is United hits different. The shirt weighs heavy, the badge weighs heavy, depending on what your role is. But part of it definitely is cultural and environmental. And as I say, while they're here, I just don't think that's going to change. If we had new owners, by the way, I think for this first part of going, if we went to Old Trafford and we realised and there was a reality of having new owners, I think it'd be amazing for the first few months. But I don't think it would be like it used to be, because football in general has changed quite a lot. Not for the better, in my opinion. You ask Liverpool, City, Chelsea, Arsenal fans, who've all got very good teams, and they'll tell you, going to the game isn't the same as it used to be. The atmosphere isn't the same. The type of people that are there are different. It's not as affordable. We can't identify with the players. There's not as many characters. There's VAR. There's all those things that go with modern football that I think most football fans don't like. And football fans are becoming customers, and football fan culture is on its arse, really. City, Liverpool, Arsenal and Chelsea fans would all say that. but they've chosen to still watch football, and they have a given team that they support. And the difference for them is the team they support within this broken system of football is playing good football and is relatively successful and good to watch. As a United fan, we have all the trappings is probably the wrong word, but the annoyances of modern football, which are just highlighted there, and the team is absolutely shit. And it has been like that for quite a long time, really. So it's a double whammy. And people say, "Well, fuck off and support Chelsea." Then, well, it's not that straightforward. I don't want sympathy. I'm saying that that's my experience as a United fan, is that modern football isn't great anyway. I choose to watch United because they're my team. But you're watching United within this mess of modern football, and it's crap. And there's no sign of it getting any better. So, like I've done today, we can talk about day to day. We can talk about game to game. We've got a game against Liverpool, which is a big game. We can talk about managers, systems, formations, players, coaches, recruitment staff, CEOs, directors of football. We can talk about all that. But I think we all know that all of that is just circumstantial evidence of the failings of the Glazers and the environment they've created. And ultimately, none of that really matters that much, because whilst they're there, they suck you under. There's no reason, pragmatically and logically, why the Glazers couldn't stay and Ineos come in. And I'm not saying we'd massively improve, but we'd get into stage one that I've spoken about, as in finishing top 6 every season. We'd improve. If you think about it logically, they're making decisions that are probably common sense decisions. Their recruitment probably is slightly better. The football side of things isn't run by the Glazers anymore. So pragmatically, logically, using your reasoning brain, you could say, well, this should really be improving. But football isn't a pragmatic, logical game. It's a game played with your heart and with your emotions. And to be perfectly real about it, the emotion and the feeling around United is one of apathy and resignation. And that's because of the Glazers. So whilst that reigns, it feels like whoever comes in alongside them is going to find it very difficult to make any changes. And plus, I don't think Ineos are that good anyway. But there should have been some improvement by now. People keep scratching their heads. I don't know why this isn't working. With the answer, every single time the answer is the Glazers. And that's why I always bring it back to that on my videos. And I always will. But unfortunately, there's no sign of that coming to an end anytime soon. And I pray for the day that changes. So to summarise, Amorim 3 years, don't reckon, unless he improves massively in the next few weeks and months. That won't happen. It's not an unconditional 3 years. It's been taken out of context by some. Liverpool, I think we will do all right. I think we could get a result, but ultimately, I don't think it'll massively impact or be a catalyst or a trigger for change. And with the ownership, well, I've said what I've said about that. Glazers out.